Well, we both laughed, which was nice. So he goes, "Did you just say street farts?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did."
Hello, welcome to the QUACKCAST. This is Arizona Ocean, and with me is Aunt Tanserine.
Hello.
Hello.
So, Tans, you're under the sea today.
I am constructing my undersea citadel.
That no one can see apart from us. Can't
Yes.
see the sea. So we are on QUACKCAST 571, and we're talking about myths and fiction that we all accept. You know, these are conventional, kind of weird, tropey kind of things that are just the alternative reality in fiction. You know, all demons speak Latin, big animals are evil and they want to kill you. You know, sharks and tigers and great apes and stuff like that. They're just evil monsters. Guns shoot people back a couple of meters, 3 feet. In. That's just what they do every time you get hit by a little tiny revolver bullet. It just blasts you back.
You can slow motion walk away from an explosion that is going on behind you.
Exactly, without reacting whatsoever or getting deaf or having your eardrums blown out. That never happens. It's just... So we're going to talk about all those kind of stuff because I got people to contribute to a nice little thread and bring up all sorts of new ones, which is good. But before we get into that, I have to bring up the featured comic. So the feature this week was a feature I did, and it's called Team 541. Today's featured comic was Team 541. A small gang of imprisoned tough guys are offered the chance to do some advanced military training. It turns out that a little earlier, while they were meeting in a park to discuss their dastardly plans, an alien starship abducted them, and they may or may not have rampaged on the craft. Perhaps we'll find out. This is an interesting specimen. The art strongly reminds me of Masamune Shiro's work on Ghost in the Shell and Appleseed. It has a very 1980s manga look, black and white, and lots of traditional halftones. The dialogue, however, features some very bad syntax, so it would seem to indicate that English isn't MG78's first language. This makes it quite a challenge to decipher the meaning, but I think it's worth it because it's a cool premise and the art is awesome. I wish MG78 had a proofreader, and he might actually get one, yes, and, they might actually get one, and it seems they are indeed do not speak English as their first language, so that is correct. Anyway, it's a good-looking black and white comic, very well done, and an interesting little story that's only 30 or so pages so far, but there's going to be so many more, and it's going to keep on going on, and it's a good comic. It was started a couple of years ago, and it's slowly progressing. It's not a very fast progressing comic, but it is coming along, and it is looking good. So anyway, it is rated E for everyone. Read it. And that was the featured comic, Team 541. That's a very interesting little manga-style comic that looks so cool, like Masamune Shiro's Ghost in the Shell or Appleseed has that kind of feel. Interim Depot or something like that. Okay, so next up there is the theme music. Gunwallace has given us a theme to a little comic called Untitled Brick Comic. So, okay, this one is piano notes, step back and forth, swaying, prevaricating, halting, hesitating, before taking the leap into action to dance, spin and twirl on a glowing dance floor to this 90s inspired dance track. So take it away, Gunwallace, with Untitled Brick Comic. And that was the featured music, Untitled Brick Comic, which is it's actually a comic by Suzanne. So I hope you like that. Alright, so next up we have the subject at hand. And what we're talking about are commonly accepted myths in fiction or conventions that we all just accept. And we have a lovely little thread to talk about as well, because a lot of people have contributed to it. Thank you very much for that, people. So you guys, do you know where this thread is? Or are you able to access it? Okay. There. So there are a lot of conventions that we just use, we just accept because we see them done so many times, and as viewers we just go, yeah, that's how life is in the world of fiction. And we've got no reason to question it, so we'll just let it slide. This is just how it is. But I think it can distort our view of reality in some respects, because we see this stuff so often that we tend to not just think of it as like an invention in fiction. We tend to think of it, oh, that's just how reality is. So they can bleed over. But anyway, there is a whole lot of things. So I listed a few of them to start off with, just as a bit of a starter. And so my thing is, so Indian burial grounds are magical and cause spirits to come to the land of the living. And we see this convention over and over, like the Amityville horror thing. I think that was a house was meant to be built on an ancient Indian burial ground underneath it, or the poltergeist or something. What?
And poltergeist and Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, Pet Cemetery as well. Like, that causes creatures to come back to life because Indian burial ground. So that is a convention. And that crops up in fiction again and again, like as a bit of a joke. Oh, is it built on an Indian burial ground? But, why should it be? It's nonsense. There's no relationship between supernatural and Indian burial grounds. That's just a dumb idea of why would there be any.
It's exotic. I mean, each culture has the magic burial ground, and you swap out what kind of burial ground it is. It could be like an older religion burial ground, like druids and stuff like that. You could also have the older, the ancient Greeks had like the older shrines, where that also had to be, like, they used to be burial grounds as well, like Minoan stuff. That was really very close to nature. That's where the magical stuff would happen in myths. I think it's just that, the mystic cultures are the ones that are assigned the magical stuff.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. I think you're right there. But I think in modern
and the older
fiction,
cultures.
In modern fiction, it's fixated on this Indian burial ground thing more than anything else. I think because American pop culture is so spread out across the world. It's so universal almost. So it kind of dictates what's going to be the next big thing. So, okay, one of my other starter ones, demons speaking Latin, Aramaic, ancient Greek, so that crops up all the time, again and again. I mean, you see, okay, so like Christianity kind of started with Christ, which isn't that long ago. It's pretty recent historically. So yeah, there's a relationship there to the Bronze Age languages. But then again, demons and devils and all that kind of stuff predate Christ by a long time. So it's logically doesn't make sense. But it's an accepted thing. So demons speak Latin.
And these aren't things that have been believed forever. These are things. I think the demon speaking other languages thing basically came up around the 70s, I think around the time of The Exorcist, and that really cemented it as a cultural kind of thing. And when it was used then, it was effective. It was connecting it to some ancient, timeless thing, right? With what that was supposed to, the impact of that. I mean, if you remember at the start of The Exorcist, it starts off at an archaeological dig. And that's how the ancient demon gets kind of stirred up and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of become something that has become shorthand for demon now, to the point where you can kind of like make fun of it a bit and stuff.
Ironically, because
some people,
it's an ecclesiastical language. It's the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the profane, right? So, I'm sorry, I got stuff in my teeth. I'll stop. That probably sounds really gross. Oh, good. That would be driving me insane. But yeah, like some people are a little bit more clever with it. Like, well, so I think of Evil Dead. And I don't think that's an actual language that they have. If it's Latin or something, then people get to revoke my classics degree. I never learned Latin, so. But the good way about that they went about that was that it was in that old language because they were reading from an ancient text. Therefore, it was written in an ancient language. When the demons came on, they were speaking English because they wanted to fuck with you. So they wanted you to understand what they were saying, i.e. will swallow your soul and that kind of shit. So, like, I think when you can use it a little bit more like that, it might work a little bit more. But yeah, that kind of sticks out to me now when people are instantly like, oh, and then they started speaking in Latin. I don't know. Yeah. It's also the backbone for like a lot of like kind of like urban myth and like ghost stories and stuff, especially on the East Coast, at least here in the US. That's where you got there are a lot of stories that people have, not necessarily even like written stories, but like personal accounts. Like, yeah, then, you know, I know such and such, and the story is that they started speaking Latin. It is kind of a cultural thing, I think. But yeah, it's when it just kind of pops up in fiction as just kind of a given thing, it does take me out of it a little bit, I do have to say.
Well, I think one of the main reasons they use Latin is because it sounds mysterious to people who don't understand it, which most people don't. It sounds scary. Yeah. There's obviously it's a real language, so there's a logic to it, and there's the logic to the sounds, and there's meaning to it, but none of us understand. I mean, obviously, like, some people do have more understanding because some people actually do know it, and there's people who speak the Latin languages, which, you know, are closer to Latin than English, so they can have a little bit more glinting of the meaning, but that makes it sound even more mysterious and demonic because they've got a hint of what it means, but they don't actually know. And
well, that depends. Like, I have two things that I want to say, but I'm going to make a little comment on that. If that holds, if the writers have done enough of research, because if they haven't and they just slap on, you know, Latin words or Greek words or whatever, and you get someone that actually knows the language, then the effect completely vanishes because usually it's something funny. And I remember there are some episodes in Xena the Warrior Princess where they're supposed to use the ancient Greek language, like a really archaic language, blah, 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 you know, to open some kind of passage or summon someone. I don't remember, but I do remember that they were using, you know, the ancient language, and I think Gabrielle had to actually channel some kind of ancient spirit that spoke the language and stuff. So, you know, they really built it up to this super mysterious, mystic thing. And it's like some of the most favorite episodes here in Greece because it's hilarious. What she is saying is good morning, good morning, good night, good night, good morning, good morning. I have your socks, I have your socks, I have your socks. And it's so awesome. Like, it's gold. Of course, it's not very mysterious or mystical.
I imagine some cheeky Greek writer that was writing that part of the episode was...
probably. Like, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Like, didn't you have a Greek person or did you have a Greek person? They were trolling you. So you have to have done your proper homework if you're going to do this, because the few that can understand what the person is saying are going to just completely wreck the effect for you afterwards.
That's why Latin's a good choice, because less people are going to understand that.
Yeah.
Or Aramaic was one, I think maybe that Damon Omen child or something, one of these ones used Aramaic. So even fewer people would be able to speak that one. So. But then again, it has the same legitimacy as Latin for these things.
Yeah.
So, okay, another big convention. Guns can't harm monsters or demons. And we just take this as for granted in fiction. So guns, swords usually can. So if you can push a monster over, So you think about if you're pushing a monster, you're probably exerting only a few newtons of force. And if you hit them with a lump of wood or a rock or something like that, there's a few more newtons. But if you fire a gun, that's channeling a massive amount of energy at a thing, and that does less harm. And that's the most harm you could do. That is that is literally a controlled explosion. That is unleashing a massive amount of force at something. But the convention is, in fiction, that guns do less harm than someone just pushing or hitting with a block or chopping with a sword, which is just totally stupid, but we all accept it. Like, we accept that, this monster, guns, jeez, that's not going to do anything. Oh, but if you punch this thing, that'll knock its block off.
Guns are consistently a problem in fiction, right? Because, it's like once you introduce them, especially, in a world where you have this big, nasty thing that you have to overcome, you have to, make it not work somehow. And it always comes up so shallow, the gun jabbed, which does happen sometimes, but, you always have to do something to it. It's, almost why even bother introducing the guns, But then you have people who are like, well, then the army got called, and the army has guns, and they're going to use guns against this thing, and so we have to make it so they just, ricochet off or something. It's guns create this weird thing in fiction that we always have to account for. It's a pain in the ass. I'm sick of it. I never draw guns in my fiction because I just don't want to fucking deal with it.
Yeah. And the thing is that the thing is that the guns don't hurt the beast, but then you have the stupid general that just gets people with more guns that do nothing, and then more guns that do nothing, and even more guns that do nothing, and yeah.
It's actually really cool when the guns. There's an excellent anime. It's called The Gate, which is the premise is suddenly there's a gate to our world that opens up, and these fantasy monsters come through and try and capture people. And the army retaliates by shooting these things and fighting them off. And it actually works. Works. And then the Japanese army goes and they take over the portal and they invade back into the fantasy world and start taking over. And anytime a monster comes up or a dragon, they shoot it with guns and attack helicopters. And that actually works. And it's super powered. And you think, oh my god, this is amazing because that's logical, and you never expect that to happen, and it's just the effect is magical and amazing because it's just unexpected. So it can work when you actually use it properly. Use guns how they're meant to be used, and wow, suddenly the logic of the world actually more fits into place, and you don't have to, play around and account for stuff, because there you go.
Those Japanese soldiers are going to be poorly defended against all of the new bacteria and illnesses that they'll have to combat, though. Let's see your guns work now.
There are more things to account for than just weapons. So yeah,
that's neither here or there. I'm just being a piece of shit. But
you piece of shit, Pet. I use a piece of shit. But yeah, it's fun. Anyway, so that was one thing. Let's see, what's another thing? Guns time. Let's see. Animals are always evil. Animals and insects are always evil and out to get you. Rather than, okay, there's an animal which has its life cycle. It needs food. It needs to protect its young. It needs to protect itself. It's scared. No, they're just evil. They just want to kill you. That monster is just, you have to kill it before it kills you, and that's how it's done. There's that big shark. No, it doesn't want to live its life. It wants to actually kill you and your whole family. And that's these insects. This spider, it doesn't want to capture a fly and eat it. It wants to poison you with venom,
wrap you up in its big cocoon, and
that snake wants to bite you on your private parts and kill you painfully. And
it'd suck until nothing else comes out. On
defense of that, though, we could say that if you look like food, if you are actually prey to this animal, they will come after you and they will want to eat you.
Yeah,
You're prey.
There's that aspect. Bears can be brutal, but snakes are just wanting to defend themselves. They're not actively
snakes
hunt and kill you. And spiders.
Oh my god!
It's rare.
There's a difference between the scene in The Revenant, which I haven't seen, but from what I hear, from the scene in The Revenant, where the guy's getting mauled by the bear and being mercilessly stalked through miles and miles by a single animal. Not that can't happen, and you were saying, Tanj, there are times when it can. There were the lions that one movie was based off of.
Oh,
The Ghost in the Darkness. Yeah, and those are real lions. They're on display in the Field Museum. They were man-eaters, and there's another one there as well. I mean, it does happen.
Tigers as well in India. There were a couple.
Right. And so, it does happen, but, I think, another thing that we come to expect with, monster fiction is that the world, we're the only focus of that world, right? It's very hominid centric, and we just don't question why that animal doesn't start chasing something else, or once you're out of its territory, why it just doesn't back off or whatever. And it works in some things, but not very often, and it's getting to the point with some animals like sharks and stuff where it's starting to really impact them poorly, because since these are animals that you don't typically have contact with, people are afraid of them, and they need support now more than ever, because they're a vital part of the ecosystem. But it's there are creatures out there that are super scary. I will always be afraid of grizzly bears, no matter what you tell me. But I don't know. Having a movie where there's this giant grizzly bear chasing you from state to state because you killed its young. That could be a cool movie.
Yeah.
Shit.
And that's truth to fiction, in the sense that, and that's actually heartbreaking. One of the man-eating and killer tigers in India was actually not one for the biggest part of its life, but they actually went and specifically killed that tiger's cubs, all of them, and then strung them out for some reason. And after that, the tiger went and specifically, she didn't care to eat anyone. She was out on revenge. So she went and just took every village one by one and attacked and killed until she was killed by humans.
Well, yeah, because by then, it was a fact to her that humans were a threat. And if there were any around her, right, then get rid of them like you would any other predator that was in your, area that might kill your children.
Exactly. So she was actually a product of human activity in the sense, and that I could buy in a movie if you had this kind of story. But having like an animal that is just like, fuck this species, like I specifically don't like humans that have done nothing to me and are not in my territory. And I just go out to find them. Yeah, that is a bit over the top.
It is.
The way Godzilla is handled, though, is a bit better, I think. Because, he's a result of, nuclear testing or whatever it was, which was huge in the 50s, especially in the Pacific. And, yeah, and then, it's I haven't watched a lot of Godzilla movies, so I should probably shut my mouth, but, I find it interesting how, as they go along and other monsters are introduced, he almost becomes like the defender of humanity. Like that you need something as big to come and get this other thing that's threatening you. So Godzilla has to come out of the sea and be like, get the fuck out of my neighborhood, and then they throw down.
Yeah, Godzilla. Also the same thing is done with King Kong.
Yeah.
Which is more a Western thing rather than the Japanese.
Though I think that, giant, kaiju level monsters are more used more symbolically than anything else. Like Godzilla is the threat of, it started off as the nuclear threat and the impact of humanity with this kind of power. And then you have King Kong being a discussion on, again, human interaction with other humans, I think, in a sense, or, whatever. Like, they are like symbolic things and concepts more than actual animals in this sense. So I don't know if they fit the stereotype of all animals are evil and out to get humans.
Yeah, I think
as
you're right
much.
there. Yeah,
these particular ones.
You're correct. Well, then, so we'll
But
move
For sure.
Oh no, go on, Tom. Sorry.
But insects are definitely that. Like, I remember Arachnophobia, if you have seen it.
It's a good one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really well done.
Those were some pretty nasty, evil spiders. With a queen. Like, they were basically aliens, but in insect form, in a sense.
Or arachnid form.
Arachnid form.
Yeah, and that's the convention, bees are out to get you, mosquitoes, wasps, they have their brains are just zeroing in on you and they just want to end you, and that's their thing. When in reality, insects are just that step up from organic robots, they're just doing what their instinct tells them to do. They don't care. They've got no real feelings about it. If they could like work out stuff and analyze the situation, the humans would be the last thing they would go after, because that's the main threat to them. They'd go after creatures that wouldn't fight back, wouldn't spray them with bug spray and destroy their hives and stuff like that. But because they don't think about it, they go for humans. And bad things happen to them because of it. Spiders are just like the most benign, anodyne creatures. Barely any of them have enough venom to hurt a person. But humans hate them, and we imagine spiders are after us. And
yeah,
it's silly. Even Australia, where we have one of the most deadly spiders in the world, the funnel web. There's only 2 species of spider here that are dangerous: the funnel web and the redback. And they hardly hurt anybody. But people are so scared of them.
And personally, I have been bitten by spiders twice in my life. And both times I feel sorry about the spiders. Like, I was scared, definitely, but I guarantee that the spider was terrified. And I think like both happened when we were vacationing in the Cyclades, and you have everything is open because it's summer and crawlies come in, and you have the anti-mosquito thing going. Usually it is something like a smoky thing. So what happened was that one of them was sort of dizzy, and it came down from the ceiling onto me as I was sleeping, and the way that it was walking on me, it tickled me. So I tried to sort of do like this with it was on my legs, and I caught one of its legs with my knees, and it bit me so that I would let it go. And that's how I woke up.
yeah.
That's nasty, because they do have actual fangs
that
that pierce the skin, and they physically
it hurt a lot.
Yeah, it's not just venom.
And unfortunately, it left its leg behind, and that's how I knew it was a spider, because its leg came off. The poor thing.
Have you seen? Someone showed a video, I think, on YouTube. I'm not sure. Of this spider. It's lost 2 legs, but then it goes to molt. So they what they do is they shed their skin, and the spider sheds its skin, and there it is, magically legs return. So it's pretty cool.
Because it's an exoskeleton, I guess. But unfortunately, like, I screamed bloody murder, and my parents came, and we killed the spider. Unfortunately, like, now I wouldn't have, but back then,
its legs aren't growing back.
No, unfortunately, and I really feel sorry for it. Like, that must have been the worst.
Terrifying. Yeah. I mean, imagine like shifting the view, not to make you feel worse, Tanya, I'm sorry. But imagine like shifting the view with insects and arachnids and stuff like that, where like you could just be walking like that, and all of a sudden the ground comes alive and takes one of your legs and then comes back to find you again and smushes you. Like, that's fucking terrifying. I mean, that's why they made shit like Honey Who Shrunk the Kids, or I Shrunk the Kids, and like that was like not as scary as it could have been, but still.
If you reverse it, it's the humans that are the terrible monster. It's I Am Legend. It's that thing.
Exactly.
Humans are the monsters who are killing these poor spiders.
The second one that bit me was in my shoe. So I tried to wear my shoe, and it bit me so that it could escape. So that one survived. I didn't chase after it. After that, that was the second one. So that one survived.
Still out there waiting to get you. It's just wanting revenge.
Ever since, no spider has bit me, and I actually like them. They're pretty awesome critters. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I like spiders.
As a former spider mama myself, I can say they can be wonderful creatures. I still do. Don't get it twisted. I still can get freaked out by spiders a little bit, but yeah, they're interesting. Some are naturally very aggressive, but a lot really aren't.
yeah.
We just sent all the aggressive ones to Australia.
Yeah. And they are pretty helpful around the house. I mean, they do eat mosquitoes, which I hate. So
yeah, nothing else is gonna get rid of those damn things.
Yeah.
Unless you've got dragonflies, they're cool. Everyone loves dragonflies.
Yeah, we do have some dragonflies, but they are mostly close to water, so they don't come around very often.
And the praying mantises, they're cool. Gorgeous. Well, they're not very good at hunting mosquitoes, but other things. Wasps are horrible, though. Frickin' wasps.
Yes.
And they go and hunt the spiders and kill them. And drag them away to their nests. It's awful. Horrible thing to see. Well, alright.
Yeah.
Off the subject of insects, then we've got people being blasted in the air by guns. This is an old thing. I mean, this was introduced in movies and TV shows as a way of making it obvious that someone's shot. Because in reality, if you get shot, you just collapse. You don't fly through the air. Unless you're shot with a cannon, like a literal huge weapon. And even then, so if you're shot with something like a 30mm autocannon, something like they have on an Apache helicopter, you just get splattered. You won't blast back because your body will absorb that force and it will wreak havoc on you. So you'll be splattered rather than thrown back. So that's what tends to happen. With weapons, your body absorbs all that force in various horrific ways, but you don't get thrown around. Even if you're blasted with a machine gun, like they show in movies, someone going boom, boom, like dancing around. That's you can have sympathetic nervous reactions or whatever, trying to dodge. I mean, let's not just get morbid. But
a lot of times, if you are shot, unless it is super strategic and everything just shuts down immediately, you can just keep going and not even realize that you're shot for a while.
Oh, true. Yeah. You can not even know and still keep on fighting or running or whatever, and not even know this thing because it seals itself in like a bullet will cause damage inside the body, but won't be gushing blood, whatever necessarily. It depends on where it's going to hit. So it'll just make the wound inside. Anyway, that's a thing in movies, and we also have taken it on as a belief. Many people believe that you get blasted back. This whole thing about Jfk Assassination, when people look at the video and say, "Oh, look at his head. He's being rocked back and to the left, back and to," and you hear these idiots repeating it. No, if you get shot in the head, your head doesn't recoil away from the angle of the shot. That's not how bullets work. On human bodies, it absorbs the force, and your head will bounce back in whatever your head decides to bounce itself back in, as a reaction. So you physically move your body, but it's not dictated like Newton's law of opposite and equal reaction, because your head is not an immovable force. Your body is not an immovable object. The energy of that bullet gets absorbed in the flesh that it goes through. So that's how the reaction is. It's not like a direct, okay, you get hit this angle and then you blast off that angle. It's not a simple Newtonian kind of thing. It's more advanced than that. But yeah, but we have taken that on. So we believe this and we repeat it when we create stuff. Like if we want to show someone being shot, we'll show them being blasted this way.
Yeah. Oh, another myth is forensics in cities and stuff where you have a team that investigates scientifically and provides the evidence for the court, and they just take, I don't know, they do insane research and they take and they find irrefutable evidence from hair follicles or from all sorts of weird things that would not be in reality admissible in court. So there's that.
Yeah, we definitely believe that. That's a myth that's like repeated over and over and over. And the idea that this person, their fingerprints don't come up in any database. Oh, they're ghosts. They've been taken off the grid. Their DNA doesn't show up. Well, of course your DNA and your fingerprints aren't going to show up if you've never been convicted of a crime, or like you've never shown up, you never submitted that stuff. It won't show up.
Yeah.
You
There's
idiot.
a whole bunch of unsolved cases specifically because there's lots of people who don't have their DNA on record or like their prints on record.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
all right. Yeah. So DNA forensics is that's a whole big can of worms. There are so many. I mean, the idea that forensics can be. I mean, this has changed a lot actually because so in the old days, the fiction kind of moved further ahead of what the reality was. So in all these kind of little crimes like that happened, they would always get these DNA samples and they would get them to the lab, and then the next day they'd get their results, and that was absolute stupid fiction because the labs weren't that well established and they had many jobs on, and you can submit your results, but fat chance you can get them back the next day because everyone else is always like they've also got like results that have been submitted to this not whatever, they've submitted stuff to the lab, and the lab's got to do all that work before they can get to yours. So that's the whole idea of that was fiction. But because DNA works so well, there's a lot more labs now, and there's a lot more experts and people doing this stuff. So that has become closer to reality. That even for like little crimes, like for vandalism and stuff, you could have DNA tests and you could submit them to a lab. And that won't cost thousands of dollars, so it's more realistic that a lab will process those kind of results. So it does catch up.
What I was thinking of more was something like having a footprint from a boot, a commercial boot, and then going through the footprint and finding some microparticle that is very bizarre, and then going through all the boots of all the suspects and finding that microparticle somewhere in their sock or something. Like something that is totally not going to hold up in court, because not only is it circumstantial evidence, it could be the result of contamination and things like that, things that would not hold in court. And
it influences a jury, but it doesn't prove you're right.
Yeah.
They can prove the likelihood of a case, the likelihood that this thing happened.
Even that, though, I mean, and the thing is that what I have read, because I don't really have a personal experience of it, is that juries nowadays have been so conditioned by series like CSI and stuff like that they want that type of evidence in order to be convinced of a that someone did a crime or, stuff like that, that makes life really difficult for court.
Yeah, they expect these sci-fi kind of
Yes.
things. Oh, another thing, speaking of that, that's a myth that we accept, is psychics. So psychics can, I can see the boy, he's at the well and he fell down and this woman's being held in a basement. Like that is not objective reality. That never happens. It can't happen. But people believe it in fiction, and people have believed it in reality, and there have been so many cases where some idiot has gone and said something to gullible police, and they've gone and investigated this stupid tip off, and of course it's led to nothing, or it's used up valuable police resources, or it's taken people away from the search area, or it's like people have given up on a person being found because of what this idiot said, and it's bad all up.
Or on the other hand, if we flip it, you have these awesome detectives that go above and beyond 24/7. They stalk, they have stakeouts for 3 days in a row or something like that, and they just basically are completely dedicated, and they go to investigate things that they would not be allowed, by law to investigate, or that people don't have that kind of dedication, and they crack the case open and stuff. When in reality, you have a lot of situations that could have been resolved if people did their job and they just didn't do it. Like, for example, receiving a legitimate tip, and they just
didn't follow it
say,
up.
okay, yes, we will follow it up, and they never do. And
that happens so often. Like back to the shoe thing. One of the reasons why I might misremember this now, but during the Richard Ramirez case, when he was out doing his bullshit, he was stupid enough to wear the same shoes and stuff like that, and they even had his prints and stuff, but there just wasn't enough, if I remember correctly. It just, things never aligned properly so that they could figure out that it was him. Because I remember there was something specific about it. He, this line of things that would have been so perfect if the investigators just would have caught on to it. Like, he went to some doctor and he had records that matched up there, like it was a dentist or something, and then something with his shoes, and things that were circling around each other. And it just, that eureka genius investigator moment just didn't happen. And there were people working extremely hard on that case, and these things just never happened. That kind of shit happens all the time. I mean, and granted, and a lot of times in fiction, the stories are about investigators who go above and beyond, right? But still, I think you're totally right, and that the way they play the system as if they find these things and then they crack the case perfectly, and then there are no complications and stuff is very much bullshit.
Speaking
a lot of the
of
time.
that, there's this this really silly trope that we have in pretty much all these detective shows is okay, so what you're saying, these superhero detectives, and they go and crack the case because there's just this one thing they notice. It's this one weird thing. Oh my god, and that's the thing. And there's always this jobbing kind of police officer that says, oh, I don't believe in what you're doing. I'm just going to go and do the normal thing of talking to people and knocking on doors and doing doing just the standard research. And the superhero detective goes, that sort of thing, that will never solve the thing. You're going by these standard methods. Geez, you got to go the superhero method. That's the only way that works, and it's always that way. The knocking on doors never works, but in reality, the knocking on doors is the only way that these things ever get solved. The superhero stuff doesn't exist. It's that.
And the severe stuff will most likely also get you in trouble if it's like off the books and shit like that.
Yeah.
It won't hold up.
Yeah, exactly. That can sink a case. That can make things take longer because get stuff thrown out.
Exactly. And that reminds me also like of House, who is not a detective, but he's this weird, like imagine having doctors break into your house to search through your stuff in order to find what is wrong with you, but they actually do it on the
It's
low.
like almost every episode.
Yeah. Go and look through this person's kitchen and find some obscure mold or something like that. Like this, doctors don't have time for this. Even if it was allowed, have you seen workload of doctors? Like it's like it doesn't happen. It never happens. And this idea of like everybody lies and that people are not going to be sincere or frank to their doctor. That's also a myth. People go to the doctor and actually do say what is wrong with them. And some of my pet peeves with the Dr. House, like I have a list.
List. Well, should we delve into some of the things that some of these people have mentioned? Foex Studios brings up the fact that, okay, so it wasn't silver that originally killed werewolves, it was quicksilver, which is an interesting thing. So mercury. And that's since changed. I mean, and that's a totally mythical thing with no relationship to reality at all. But so yeah, so werewolves were killed by silver, which is interesting. Oh no, there is a slight relationship because he talks about the werewolves that were terrorizing France. So I think if you remember, there was this famous case of people being very scared of wolves in France, and some people being killed, and like people sort of spreading the ideas that it was werewolves, whereas it was probably a serial killer that was killing people. I don't know. You probably don't know that story. It's rather interesting. There's a film made of Brotherhood of Wolves, I think, which is a rather interesting film about that. Let's see, what else are there? Oh yeah, the sounds that swords. Okay, there's a lot of sword myths. Heaps of swords. So swords always go shink all the time when they go into scabbards. They're always going shing, ching, ching, and they're always making these noises, even if they're just swishing through the
metal
air.
noises.
Yeah.
Oh, and they click and have these little noises of metal on metal, like they are loosely screwed together, which would be horrible for a sword. Like,
oh yeah, because those fold.
That happens with guns as well. Like you pick up a gun and it goes like that sort of thing. Which
held together by paint and wishes.
Yes.
Another big thing with swords is, of course, the back scabbard, which makes almost no sense. I mean, it can work, but only for really short swords, or the swords that's like sticking up hugely above your neck, and you whack your head on them every time you turn around. But there's double swords, which like they just get in the way of each other, you know. They can work if they're really short, like Chinese butterfly knives, but the skill it takes to use two swords at once is a hell of a lot of skill, and it means you're using less power. They get in the way of each. You can use one to attack, one to defend and stuff, but it's not as good as one sword. One sword is so much better than two swords. But the idea in fiction,
especially if that sword is longer, like the longer it gets, is like the more sense it makes just to use both hands on one sword.
Exact, double your power, because the whole logic of a sword is a sword is a point, and the more force you can give to that single point, the more it's going to stab through. If you have less force, then it's not as effective. But the thing is that the whole two swords thing is meant to show skill. So an incredibly skilled swordsman in fiction will use 2 swords or 2 guns, but in reality, you have less ability if you have 2, because you spread your skills out, or you spread your attention and you spread your strength. So it means you're less effective if you have 2 swords or 2 guns, especially because you can't aim 2 guns at the same time. Like, you could pump twice the amount of bullets into someone, but only if they were up close and you didn't have to aim them both.
Yeah.
So yeah, the double sword thing. What are some other sword myths? They can chop through anything really easily. No, if you've got armor.
Yeah. And generally the way you see people use them in movies and stuff is different than, I mean, I can't speak for every sword art, but like generally with swords a lot of times you're more moving the wrist, turning the wrist and stuff like that, and that's how the tip of the sword shouldn't be going everywhere. The tip of your sword should always be pointing at your enemy for the most part, and it's mainly the wrist that moves. So like when you see people like doing these huge chops and stuff, like it's good for dramatic effect, but I don't know. I mean, maybe this is more splitting hairs, no pun intended, but like
well,
we're just delving into tropes we don't like now.
There's the typical samurai moves. So there is an overhead chop for that, which is a standard thing.
Well, yeah,
in Kendo,
there is an overhead chop, but there's things that aren't, and you're not going to use that for your go-to in fighting typically because it leaves you wide open.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You'll get gutted.
And there is a thing, like I am definitely not an expert in swords. The only thing I have done was for my fantasy series that I studied the styles of sword fighting and different swords and stuff to match, the proper sword to my characters and also to the culture. But they seem to forget that each sword has a matching style of, like, you use it in a certain way. You don't use the same the 2 different swords the same way. If you have a broadsword, you will not use it the same as a scimitar or as a rapier or what have you. They have different styles of handling the sword, and also I would expect, but correct me if I'm wrong, Face, because you are the one that does the sword fighting. But some styles are better fitted to different body types, in the sense if you are small, petite, and don't have much force, you would need a different kind of sword than if you are like a big hulking guy that has a lot of force behind the swing, whatever that is. So that would be my understanding of it.
The way I understand swords, like I said, I definitely don't know every fighting style of sword that there is, but generally how swords work is there should be almost as little physical force put into it as possible. You make the blade work for you. So like if you're using your whole body to chop, I mean, if there are exceptions to this, I would love to know them, because that's probably really interesting. But unless you're doing something like, I don't know, like decapitating someone, I don't know, just sharpen. If you're using that much force, just sharpen your fucking sword. But so I don't think, I mean, there are probably different styles that go better with, like, I would think there'd be more of a difference of according to height rather than build, like muscular proportion.
There's some
but
things.
Yeah, it is something.
I mean, say in the Napoleonic era, got that word out. So you'd have the heavy cavalry would have big, heavy swords because they were big men. They were very tall, over 6 feet. So you'd give them longer swords, and they'd be often heavier because you'd be on huge horses and you'd be charging. So they would have bigger, heavier swords, whereas the light cavalry would have lighter swords. And especially infantry would have even lighter, because you're on the ground, and if your sword's too long, you could be hacking into the ground by accident and things like that. And you haven't got the stamina because you're walking around everywhere and you're having to carry this bloody thing. So whereas say if you're on a horse, you don't have to carry it all the time. So there's, in terms of strength and all that, and endurance, that can be a factor in some ways.
Makes sense.
So I have a couple of light cavalry swords from the Napoleonic era myself.
Interesting. Would you like to show us your sword?
Whip it out. Probably best not to while I'm on the QUACKCAST, because I'll have to take my headphones off and go over to the damn things.
Got you.
I'll show it on the video cast next time.
There you go.
So yeah, another thing in sword battles, turning your back spins. That's universal. Like in fiction, you'll see people always doing the spin and then turning their back and doing the backflips to get away. Only cause automatic death. If you turn your back, you maybe can get away with that once or twice, but you're probably not gonna. And if you're gonna backflip to get away, no, you're dead, because backflipping is maybe if like there kind of can be some special situation where someone's shooting a gun at you and they're not expecting you to move that way, maybe that could work. But if you're with a sword, you're slower than if you were running, because
right. And when you're backflipping, you can't change direction either. It's better just to hop out of the way or lunge and shit like that. Like if you're in midair, you're kind of like committed to that move.
Yes, you are, and they're gonna know exactly where you're gonna land too. So like Tans made a comment that you can throw a sword like a spear. You really can, and why wouldn't you if someone's gonna land right over there?
Yeah.
And you can't hold a sword if you're backflipping either, because you have to use your hands. So you're defenseless. But they always do that. And we see someone spinning a sword too. So if someone's spinning a sword really fast, especially spinning two swords, that means they're super expert. And yeah, you can intimidate someone if you're spinning swords, but it doesn't mean you're expert. It just means you're good at spinning swords. Like, it means you're expert at not cutting yourself, because you have to be pretty good to do that without hacking your face off if you're spinning two swords. But it doesn't mean you're a good swordsman.
Spinning swords? Like a baton?
Yeah, so you hold them with the hilts, and you can spin two swords at the same time. There's excellent videos of these women who do the shaskas, which are Cossack swords, and they spin them like this. Like they go holding the hilt, so they're not spinning like from the middle. They're holding them from the end, but they can spin them, and it looks incredible. But it doesn't mean they're skilled fighters. It just means they're skilled dancers, basically, with the blades.
Yeah.
But in fiction, it's come to mean that you're a skilled fighter if you can spin swords.
Yeah. Which
is a myth that we all believe. Well, I mean, you guys don't, but most people do. So yeah, that's a really silly one. Which was, of course, exploded. Well, not exploded, but of course, there's a famous scene in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark where the guy spins his sword and then gets shot. But we do believe that he's an expert swordsman.
Yeah.
Because we see him do that. Well, I mean, there are many more things we can cover, but we can't because we're going over time, so we should finish up now. So, thank you for listening to QUACKCAST number 571. This has been the Mythcast.
Thank you.
Mythcast.
Thank you.
Just basically ended up talking about tropes that we don't like again.
Well, no, I think we actually have covered some myths. And there are more. So, bye-bye.